Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're opening up a set of sources that really delve into a case that has shaken Kazakhstan. It's a tragedy involving deep personal pain, abuse, and ultimately it became a catalyst for significant national change.
Yeah, we're talking about the case of Saltanat Nukenova.
Exactly.
And the material we've gathered for this deep dive, it comes largely from a pretty comprehensive YouTube exploration. It pulls together details from articles, official documents, and really crucially, excerpts from the court proceedings themselves. It paints a difficult picture, but an essential one.
So our mission here is to try to understand who Saltanat was, to unravel the horrifying events that led to her death, examine the actions and, the background of her husband, the former minister Kwandik Bishimbayev.
Right.
And also explore the profound impact this whole case has had across Kazakhstan.
And we do need to say up front, the details contained in the sources, the things we'll be discussing, they are graphic, they describe severe violence. It's definitely a challenging story, but like you said, understanding it feels vital.
Okay, so let's start by getting to know Saltanat Nukenova herself. The sources tell us she was born May 15th, 1992, in Pavlodar, which is up in northeastern Kazakhstan, pretty near the Russian border.
And she came from a really supportive, close-knit family. They had roots in successful business going back, like, generations.
Wow.
Yeah, her family was well regarded. Apparently, she even had a local uncle with some political influence. By all accounts, just deeply loved.
She sounds like she was a truly vibrant person.
Yeah.
Descriptions in the sources, they paint this picture of someone bright, cheerful, really intelligent, independent, known for her kindness, her respectfulness, beautiful, not just outwardly, but inside too. Apparently, some people even said she looked a bit like Scarlett Johansson.
Interesting detail. And she studied in England, showing that independent spirit pretty early on.
Right.
When she returned to Kazakhstan, she settled in Almaty, that's the bustling former capital, the largest city. And she initially lived with her brother, Baykamal. Their bond was clearly very strong, and that relationship, well, it becomes incredibly important later in the story.
So Saltanat pursued her passion, it was a childhood dream apparently, and became a well-known astrologer. But with a unique approach. What made her stand out?
Well, from the sources, it seems she wasn't just about, making predictions. Her clients really sought her out for support and guidance. She became a sort of confidant for them.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the sources mention that after initially having some male clients who were, let's say, primarily seeking her out for dates rather than actual guidance.
Oh, right.
She made the decision to only accept female clients, ensuring her professional boundaries. She'd built a successful career, really had a very bright future ahead of her.
A future tragically cut short after she met Kwandik Bishimbayev. He was born April 11th, 1980, during the Kazakh SSR era. That was when Kazakhstan was still part of the Soviet Union.
Right. And his background couldn't be more different, really, in terms of privilege and influence. His father was the rector of a prestigious university and was known to be close to the country's first long-serving president, Nursultan Nazarbayev.
So high-level connections.
Exactly. These connections clearly provided him with an exceptionally privileged path right from the start.
And that privilege seems like it was coupled with some undeniable ambition. He finished high school incredibly early, at 15.
Yeah, 15. And rapidly acquired multiple degrees, including a master's from George Washington University in the U.S. that was on Kazakhstan's prestigious Bolshak scholarship program.
Oh yeah, the state-funded one for top students.
That's the one. So by the time he was 21, he already had multiple advanced degrees. The sources really note this drive he had to leverage every single opportunity his background afforded him.
And it seems like it worked. It propelled him through a remarkably fast career ascent. Started at the Development Bank of Kazakhstan in 2001 and just climbed the ranks almost annually, it sounds like.
Yeah.
By his late 20s, he was advising ministers, even the prime minister. Eventually became an advisor within the presidential administration itself.
Yeah, a meteoric rise.
Leading to his appointment as Minister of National Economy in 2016 at just 36, the youngest ever. An astonishing rise, but then followed by a very public fall.
Exactly. His career just abruptly ended. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau investigated, and he was found guilty of bribery and embezzlement, convicted in March 2018, sentenced to 10 years in prison.
And this is where those family connections seem to come back into play, isn't it?
It certainly looks that way. The sources highlight that because of his family's influence, he was able to apply for a presidential pardon.
Ah.
So his 10-year sentence got reduced to just 4 years, and perhaps most controversially, he only served about a year and a half of that.
Just a year and a half.
Yeah. He was released on December 11, 2020.
Wow. Remarkable. Released just a couple of years before his path crossed with Saltanat's. He also had a history in his personal life, 2 previous marriages, 4 children in total.
Right. And his second divorce was finalized in 2020, the very same year he got out of prison.
Okay. So fast forward to 2022, after his release, second divorce. Bishimbayev sees Saltanat on social media. Successful, beautiful, well-known astrologer.
And he became, according to the sources, infatuated.
His pursuit sounds like it was pretty relentless.
Absolutely. He started by trying to book an astrology consultation, which, seems like a pretty clear attempt just to get close to her.
Yeah, a pretext.
Exactly. Saltanat initially refused, sticking to her women-only client policy, but he was incredibly persistent, messaging her, urging her not to judge him by his past or what was in the news, asking her to just give him a chance.
So Saltanat, seeing this persistence, she turned to her family, especially her brother, Baikamal.
Yes, for advice. And they were aware of Bishimbayev's history, the powerful family, the ministerial position, but also the corruption conviction and the 2 divorces.
So they were cautious.
They were cautious, concerned even, but didn't explicitly forbid her from meeting him, kind of trusting her judgment, it seems.
And so she agreed to meet him, maybe intending to screen him herself. But what followed was what the sources call a deliberate promotion period from Bishimbayev.
Yeah, and it highlights a really common tactic in abusive relationships, unfortunately. He showed her his absolute best side. Incredibly caring, seemed trustworthy, presented himself as this sort of protective figure.
And she bought it initially.
It seems she was genuinely taken in. She told her friends she believed he was a truly good person, serious about the relationship, someone who could care for and protect her.
Things moved extremely quickly from there. After only about 2 months of dating in 2022, he proposed that December. Saltanat, age 30, married him, age 42.
And the sources note there wasn't any mention of a legal registration for the marriage. On the wedding day itself, Saltanat seemed happy, posting online about her best husband. It looked like a joyful occasion.
But this is where the story takes just a devastating turn. The sources indicate the abusive behavior began almost immediately, within hours of the wedding ceremony.
Yeah, the charming facade just dropped, and Bishimbayev's true, controlling nature emerged.
That shift sounds chillingly rapid.
It really does. The man who appeared so protective became prone to severe temper tantrums, violent outbursts, even destroying property when he was angry. There's an incident mentioned at a New Year's family dinner.
Oh, yeah?
Where he apparently flipped a table just because people opened gifts without him being there. A stark early example.
Wow. And this quickly escalated beyond just property damage, didn't it?
Dramatically so. He became consumed by jealousy and control, constantly accusing her of infidelity. The sources say he reportedly even hired people to follow her.
Hired people.
Yeah. He began systematically isolating her, just chipping away at her privacy, her independence.
And that isolation included controlling her finances?
Yes. He forbade her from working, forcing her to rely entirely on his money. That's a classic control mechanism, right? Making your partner financially dependent.
Absolutely.
And he also cruelly belittled her successful astrologer profession, dismissing it as just some stupid science for women.
And tragically, the abuse then became physical.
It did. He began hitting her. The sources recount this pivotal moment around March 2023 when Saltanat sent photos of her bruised and swollen face to her brother, Baikamal.
Oh my God.
This was the first concrete evidence her family saw of the physical violence.
Baikamal's reaction, understandably, must have been immediate.
Fierce. He was enraged, went straight to their home, confronted Bishimbayev, told Saltanat to pack her things, even called the police. He was determined to get her out of there right then and there.
But Saltanat, she didn't leave with him that day.
No, she stopped her brother, and this is just a heart-wrenching part of the story. She asked him not to make a big deal, saying she wanted to give Bishimbayev another chance.
Oh, Saltanat.
The sources indicate she tragically questioned if maybe it was somehow her fault, and she also feared the societal judgment, the stigma she might face if she separated, especially given Bishimbayev's public profile. She actually asked her brother for emotional support, not intervention, in that moment.
And this decision to stay, unfortunately, just led to the abuse intensifying.
It did. The control tightened further. The sources suggest he used blackmail, potentially with explicit photos or videos taken without her consent to prevent her from leaving.
That's horrific.
Friends observed her becoming increasingly distressed, looking trapped, just not herself. One friend even noticed marks on her neck that suggested strangulation.
And through all of this, he continued to be unfaithful.
Yes, his infidelity was ongoing, just adding another layer of betrayal and pain to the abuse she was already enduring.
Which brings us to the final tragic sequence of events, starting on November 8th, 2023. They attended a concert in Astana.
And even there, in public, his disrespect was just blatant. Bishimbayev left the concert for about 40 minutes. Saltanat later found out he'd spent that time with another woman.
At the concert?
Yeah. This betrayal, happening so openly, is described in the sources as a real breaking point for her. Truly the last straw.
So after the concert, the argument continued and Bishimbayev took her to Bal restaurant. This restaurant was owned by his cousin, Zanabek Zanov.
Right.
And its location opposite the Ministry of Defense meant it was frequented by influential people.
And it was from this restaurant, late on November 8th or maybe early November 9th, that Saltanat made a definitive decision. She called her brother Baykamal and told him she was finally leaving Bishimbayev. She was coming home. Baykamal was waiting for her.
The initial confrontation at the restaurant, as captured by some of the recovered footage, it started around 12:30 to 1:00 a.m.
Yeah. Saltanat announced she was leaving him, tried to call the taxi.
And the CCTV near the entrance.
It's chilling. It shows Saltanat looking utterly exhausted, just leaning against a wall. Bishimbayev approaches, physically grabs her face to make her look at him, blocking her attempt to leave.
And then there's that critical gap in the surveillance footage.
Yes, footage covering approximately 12:30 a.m. to 5:30 a.m. was later found to have been deleted, a key part of the cover-up that followed.
The situation then escalated dramatically around 7 a.m. They were still at the restaurant, the argument still raging. Bishimbayev subjected her to horrific verbal abuse.
He made these cruel, possessive claims, saying he owned her because he bought her clothes, calling her worthless without him. Saltanat, clearly in deep pain, took off her clothes, leaving only her outer jacket, offering them back to him.
Oh, wow. Like a desperate act of defiance.
Exactly. Defiance and heartbreak. She told him she regretted ever loving him, regretted enduring his cruelty, calling him a cruel, heartless cheater.
And this confrontation? It led directly to the brutal assault. Around 7:10 a.m., the recovered CCTV footage revealed the unthinkable.
The footage and the testimony later described just a savage attack. Bishimbayev is seen pushing her down, repeatedly kicking her, specifically and intentionally stomping on her groin area.
Oh, God.
He dragged her by her hair, punched her so hard her nose broke, and repeatedly smashed her head against a hard stone wall. This wasn't quick. It was a prolonged, brutal beating.
He then dragged her into a restroom.
Yes. They were inside for nearly an hour, estimated around 50 minutes. Saltanat could be heard screaming for help, and appallingly, the restaurant staff apparently did nothing, reportedly out of fear of Bishimbayev.
But a security guard did try to alert Bishimbayev's cousin, the owner.
He did. He called Zanabek Zanov reportedly twice, but Zanabek didn't come to the restaurant. Yeah. His excuse was that he was too sleepy.
Too sleepy, while someone is screaming for help.
Unbelievable. And the attack wasn't over. Bishimbayev left the restroom briefly, grabbed a bottle of alcohol, and went back in. The assault continued for over another hour. And disturbingly, he used his own phone to record clips of the abuse. Video showing her condition, paired with his verbal abuse, molestation, false accusations.
He recorded it.
He recorded parts of it. Sources describing the videos, which weren't fully shown in court due to brutality, but were described, noted her naked, forced onto a toilet, her face bloody and swollen, head hanging low, while he just ranted at her, falsely accusing her of infidelity. He reportedly choked her until she passed out, only to continue when she regained consciousness.
This is just beyond comprehension. Following this horrific assault, the focus shifted to a desperate attempt at cover-up and just cruel neglect. Around 9:30 a.m., hours after the main attack, Bishimbayev finally called his cousin Zanabek.
Right, and he instructed Zanabek to come to the restaurant and bring blankets, claiming Saltanat was merely sleeping, implying she was just drunk.
So Zanabek arrived about 30 minutes later.
Yeah. He went to the VIP room, saw the scene, the mess, Saltanat injured, largely undressed. Bishimbayev told him to cover her with a blanket, repeating that she was asleep. Zanabek later claimed he didn't look closely, wanting to be respectful to his cousin's wife.
Respect.
That was his claim. Said he only noticed swollen red eyes, which he dismissed as being from drinking or crying. But a really disturbing detail highlighted from the sources. Zanabek stated Saltanat actually tried to reach for him.
She reached for him?
Tried to reach for him, but he actively avoided looking directly at her and just left the room. A truly chilling example of the bystander effect.
Unbelievable. And the cover-up went further. Around noon, so another 2.5 hours later, with Saltanat still unconscious and critically injured, Bishimbayev messaged Zanabek,
explicitly ordering him to delete all the restaurant's CCTV footage from the night before.
And Bishimbayev supervised this.
Reportedly supervised the deletion himself. Zanabek's excuse for complying, claiming he thought maybe they'd had sex and Bishimbayev didn't want it seen, was, rightly seen as incredibly flimsy given the state of the room.
Yeah, that doesn't hold water.
Fortunately, investigators were later able to recover that deleted footage.
They also tried to create a false trail, didn't they? To mislead Saltanat's family.
Yes. Bishimbayev instructed Zanabek to take Saltanat's phone to her gym across the street, apparently, where her brother Baikamal was tracking her location via her phone.
Ah, clever but sinister.
Right. Then drive around with it, then finally take it to their apartment. It was a calculated attempt to make it seem like Saltanat was alive and just going about her normal routine.
Meanwhile, Saltanat lay dying for hours in that room. Bishimbayev's neglect is almost incomprehensible.
He tried to wake her in the afternoon. She was unresponsive. But instead of calling emergency services, he called his personal astrologer.
He called his astrologer?
Yes. And in this unbelievable turn, the astrologer reportedly told him not to worry, that Saltanat was simply sleeping and would be fine. And Bishimbayev chose to believe this over the clear medical emergency unfolding right in front of him.
I have no words for that. And during this period, while his wife was suffering, potentially dying, he continued his own activities.
Yeah. Around 3 p.m., he was in another VIP room in the same restaurant, having lunch with an influencer. Later that evening, around 7:07 p.m., the sources indicate he messaged a contact, rumored to be a prostitute, asking if she was available.
It wasn't until around 7:17 p.m., many hours after the assault, that Bishimbayev tried to wake Saltanat again and finally discovered she had no pulse.
Only then did he finally call an ambulance.
Paramedics arrived just before 8:00 p.m.
They found Saltanat with catastrophic injuries, bruised extensively all over her body. Despite their efforts, it was far too late. They determined she had likely died hours earlier. Sources noted her eyes weren't fully closed, some describing them as wide open, which can be a sign of severe trauma and, very delayed intervention.
The initial police response regarding Bishimbayev himself caused significant outrage when it later came to light.
He was detained, sure, but reports indicated he received preferential treatment at the police station, handcuffs removed, allowed to smoke. And even more appallingly, a police officer allegedly made a comment suggesting Saltanat must have provoked the attack, saying something like, "She must have provoked you, right?"
Victim blaming from the start.
Exactly. That drew widespread condemnation when it was revealed during the trial.
Saltanat's family received the devastating news that same day.
It must have been just heartbreaking. Her brother, Baikamal, who had been waiting for her to come home, immediately knew Bishimbayev was responsible. The family was plunged into grief. Saltanat's mother was reportedly hospitalized because of the shock.
And Bishimbayev's family's reaction, that apparently further fueled the family's determination for justice.
Yeah, the sources note that Bishimbayev's family offered no apologies, no condolences. His mother and sister were reportedly defiant, telling Saltanat's family that the case couldn't be proven, claiming Bishimbayev wasn't a murderer. Wow.
This perceived callousness and denial, understandably, just solidified Baikamal's resolve to fight for justice for his sister.
So Bishimbayev was initially charged with torture and murder.
And he pleaded not guilty to both charges, setting the stage for the trial.
The case gained massive national attention, partly because of Bishimbayev's status as a former minister, but also because the details emerging were just so horrific.
Absolutely. And the trial itself became this huge national event. Bishimbayev himself requested a public trial, maybe hoping to sway public opinion or portray himself as innocent.
Appears to most.
Very. But this request led to something unprecedented in Kazakhstan. The trial was live streamed on YouTube and social media. Millions tuned in, not just in Kazakhstan, but across the Russian-speaking world. It was like a national reckoning playing out for everyone to see.
And Bishimbayev's defense strategy was largely based on blaming Saltanat. Pretty much. He claimed she was mentally unstable, unfaithful, even brought up accusations of an affair. His core argument for her death was that she was drunk and simply fell, hitting her head on a toilet. He was noted as being articulate, using his political experience to try and present this convincing, composed front during the trial.
But the evidence presented just systematically dismantled that narrative.
The forensic expert testimony was absolutely crucial. They presented findings showing Saltanat's injuries were far too severe and widespread to be caused by a simple fall onto a toilet. They even used a mannequin to demonstrate the numerous bruises, fresh and older ones, covering her face and body. Stark evidence of repeated abuse over time.
And the autopsy results also directly contradicted his claims.
Definitely. The autopsy revealed strangulation marks on her neck, a severe skull injury, and a brain hemorrhage as the cause of death. And crucially, her blood alcohol level was found to be very low, directly refuting his claim that she was heavily drunk.
And then there was the recovered CCTV footage. Undeniable proof.
Exactly. Investigators successfully recovered the deleted footage from the restaurant, and this footage showed Bishimbayev violently kicking and beating Saltanat repeatedly before he dragged her away. It utterly destroyed his defense that she simply fell.
And then there were Bishimbayev's own phone recordings.
Yeah, the police recovered those disturbing clips he had recorded during the abuse. While the video itself was deemed too brutal for public viewing in court, the audio was played. The sources describe these harrowing sounds of Saltanat screaming for mercy, crying out in pain. That, perhaps more than anything, revealed the true nature of the abuse and his cruelty.
Bishimbayev tried to argue these videos were fabricated, edited by his enemies.
He did, but that was rightly dismissed as the evidence against him just kept mounting. The combination of forensic evidence, autopsy results, recovered CCTV, and his own recordings. It really left no room for doubt about his guilt.
And so, on May 13, 2024, under this intense gaze of national and even global attention, the verdict was delivered.
Kondik Bishimbayev was found guilty of torture and murder. He was sentenced to 24 years in prison, that was 20 years for the murder, and 4 years for the torture and abuse charges. This was the maximum sentence for murder under Kazakh law at that time.
Is parole possible?
He could potentially be eligible for parole after serving 16 years, but crucially, that would require consent from Saltanat's family.
Ah, okay. And his cousin, Zanabek Zanov, the restaurant owner who deleted the footage.
He received a 4-year sentence for concealing the crime and complicity.
Now, while the conviction was certainly a victory for justice, many felt Bishimbayev's 24-year sentence was still too lenient, right? Given the severity of the crime. There were calls for a life sentence.
There were, absolutely. However, the sheer scale of public outrage and the visibility of that live stream trial made this case an incredibly powerful catalyst for change. Human rights groups, women's organizations, and Saltanat's family spearheaded this nationwide movement demanding stronger laws against domestic violence.
And those efforts led to real legislative change. In April 2024, Kazakhstan passed a significant new law.
That's right. This law dramatically increased penalties for various forms of domestic violence, physical assault, sexual abuse, murder. And crucially, it allows for potential life sentences in domestic violence murder cases now. It's been informally named Saltanat's Law in her honor.
A fitting tribute.
A recognition that her tragic case was really the driving force behind this vital legal reform.
Saltanat's case exposed a deep-seated systemic issue in Kazakhstan, didn't it?
It really shone a harsh light on some alarming statistics, like a 2018 UN report finding that 400 women die from domestic violence annually in Kazakhstan, with something like 100,000 reports filed each year. The sources describe Kazakhstan as a patriarchal society, and Saltanat's story, played out so publicly during the trial, forced this unavoidable national conversation about the pervasive problem of violence against women.
So this deep dive into the sources, it reveals a story of just devastating personal tragedy and betrayal. But it also highlights this widespread issue of domestic violence and the critical importance of accountability, especially when perpetrators hold positions of power or influence.
It's a legacy born of immense pain, isn't it? Where one woman's story, amplified by this public demand for truth, fueled a movement that has already begun to change the legal landscape and hopefully offer greater protection to victims in the future.
And it makes you think. The bystander effect played such a tragic role here. From the restaurant staff to the cousin. What responsibility do individuals have when they witness or suspect abuse, even if it seems like a private matter? And how can we empower bystanders to overcome that fear, and regain safely?
That's a really important question that goes way beyond just this single case.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive today. We hope this exploration of the Saltanat Nukenova case, drawing from the available source material, has provided some valuable insight into its complexities and its broader significance.
We really appreciate you spending this time with us, researching and presenting these incredibly difficult cases comprehensively from the sources. It's always challenging, and we just strive to offer the clearest picture we can based on the material we have.
Join us next time for another deep dive into the information that shapes our world.
Until then, please take care.